I don't exactly look like somebody's grandmother, do I? I mean, if your grandmother looked like this, what would you think of her? Holy moly. You know, you don't want to look like this when you're a grandmother, when you're somebody's grandmother. You know, like a sheepdog or something with matted fur. it's it's hilarious when I look at myself and oh my goodness, what the heck? That that's not me in that video. Is it me? Yeah, it's me. That's the way I look right now, this moment, as I talk to you. It's supposed to be a 1 minute long, um, what do you call it? A 1 minute long video. I wanted to show you a picture of my grandmother, you know, the way she looked. Where is she? She was with a budgie. She was with a budgie. Oh, maybe it's not in here. Oh, I don't have it here. But she used to look like a real lady, you know, with, oh, gee whiz, all my stuff fell on the floor. But I don't know if the light is shining. You can't really see the pictures, but that's my grandmother. Oh, she was a real lady, wasn't she? She was in her mid-40s, I think, she told me. And she went to her sister's graduation in London, Ontario, because her sister became a nurse. And that is my father. No, that's not my father. This is my Aunt Olive. She graduated and she became a psychiatric nurse. And she was very, very proud of her sister. Her sister didn't marry yet. She was 39 years old when she became a registered nurse. So my grandmother, that's my great-grandmother. That's my grandmother's mother. That's Mrs. Farr, Farr. She was at the graduation too. She came to watch her daughter graduate from nursing school, university or college, whatever it was back in the day. And so that's a lot of years ago. That would have been in the 1920s, I guess. My father was born in 1920. Well, this was in the 30s. I think she said it was in the 1930s. And she became a nurse. And it was very unusual for a girl to get an education in those days. But they were well-off farmers, and so they could afford to send their daughter to school. Where is that picture? This was their home. This is where they lived. They lived in this beautiful country home in Hanover, Walkerton, Ontario. It was right on the highway. And I think that's what they call Bruce County, Brusce, Bruce, because it was Scottish. So they named it after Scotland. They were the Scotland people, Scottish people from Scotland. And so my heritage is, my DNA is 70% Scottish. And they were Protestant. And they were from the east coast of Scotland. The east coast of Scotland. So that's where the DNA goes. When you go to ancestry.ca, that's where you get your DNA. Thank you very much. And no, I don't look like a grandmother. Oh my goodness. I need a hairdresser. It's a world pandemic right now. Pretty hard to find a hairdresser. And I haven't been to the hairdresser since last year. And my hair needs to be trimmed, and I had a really good hairdresser 2 years ago, and she came from India, and she was the best hairdresser I'd ever been to, but she's gone now because the beauty salon closed. I think it was called Magic Cuts, and I don't know where they moved, but they're not there anymore. So I guess they closed down the business and moved. Hard to keep up with local small business nowadays. So I'm almost 80 years old now, and I should really have a braid, because older grandmothers, they have braids. But nobody in my family wore braids. My grandmother didn't have a braid, and my father's mother, I didn't notice any braids. But I love braids, I don't know where I got that from. My husband used to tell me that I looked like a Bosanka, a girl in Bosnia. So maybe I got it from the Bosnian people, or maybe from the Indian people, because we knew an awful lot of people from India, from northern India. And the custom is the girls wear their hair long in one long braid down their back. So that's the way I wore my hair back in the 1970s. And I like the shorter hairstyles, of course. Why wouldn't I? But it was just so hard to find a hairdresser back in the day to do short hair. So I ended up looking like a boy by the time I was 17. My hair didn't grow very long, so that was good, because I looked horrible in long hair. So by the time I was 17, I looked like this. Not exactly a farmer's daughter, am I? I'm in the big city now. And I was 17. A sweet young thing, innocent as they come. And I was going to business college in Toronto. And I graduated in June. And this is my picture that was in my first passport when I was 17, and I had permanent residency to the United States of America, because I thought I'd work a few years and then I would go on a holiday to the USA, to Philadelphia, and I would see Dick Clark and go to the show and American Bandstand. And that's what I wanted to do. It was my dream to go and visit Dick Clark, American Bandstand. But I didn't make it. Unfortunately, I did not make it to Philadelphia. But I had the passport. It was all set to go with my big steamer trunk, and I would move there. But I got sidetracked, but that's okay. Everything worked out well in the end. That's the end of a happy story about the farm. Oh, and by the way, smallpox. Not smallpox, before that. It was called scarlet fever. And that's what my daddy had when he was a little boy. Where is the picture of my father? When my father was a child in school, I have a picture here somewhere. Maybe it fell on the floor. I tend to knock things down. I've got all kinds of pictures here, and pictures my grandmother gave me. That's my dad. You see, there's my dad. And he was on a bicycle. He was just a child when he got scarlet fever. Can you see that okay? That a couple of kids on a bicycle? Oh, no. No. That they had the dog. They had the dog hooked up to a sled, him and his best friend. In later years, of course, his best friend joined the Air Force. And he died in a plane accident. He was a pilot. But my daddy, see, they were at the county fair. That's what it was. It was the county fair. You see the old vehicle in the background? That's a 1930s vehicle. So if my dad was born in 1920, then this photo, he must have been at least 12 or 13 in here. And they both got scarlet fever. It was very, very contagious. It was a world pandemic. And according to this document I just found on the internet, scarlet fever weakened my father's heart. And he didn't get to go with his friend in the armed forces because his heart was too weak. And so he was not accepted by the Canadian Army. But his friend was, and his friend was only 21 when he died as a pilot. And I don't know if there are any descendants or ancestors, descendants of that pilot, but I do have the copy of the newspaper clipping that my father kept. That was my grandmother actually kept it for my father. And he always cried for his friend. He always thought of his friend, his best friend, that he lost when he was a young man, age 21. And they were the same age, But that's their dog. It was a shepherd, I guess. Not a shepherd, a shepherd dog. A lassie dog. I call them lassie dogs. But he was a beautiful dog and a country dog. And I thought about my father today, and I thought about the world pandemic today, and I thought about what my dad had when he was a kid. And it was scarlet fever. But he lost his best friend, and he never got over that, and he got married young. My dad was only 24, and he had 3 children. I'm the oldest, and he had 2 sons, of course. He had my brother Dale, and then he had Danny, his younger son. But my father, I was telling my adult children today about my father, and that he married a woman from the city, and my grandmother didn't get along with her very well. She was a city girl, you see, so she didn't understand the farm and 100 acres, and she didn't want to get stuck on a farm. Raising chickens, and that was not a glorified lifestyle for my mother. My mother was a city girl. She was going to be a movie star someday, but she did eventually, when I was about 14, become a registered nurse. And, maybe she was the second youngest in her family of 8 kids, and one died, so the second youngest of seven children. So she wanted to become a nurse, actually a movie star, but then later on, when I was 14, she became a registered nurse. We do change careers, we women. But so I have some memories of my childhood and pictures, and that's very special to have any photos, because we had a terrible house fire, and so did my grandmother actually, but she managed to salvage these photos out of the fire. It's very devastating, when you go through a war or a house fire. But my grandmother had a house fire, and then I personally had a house fire in 1985, and it was a very tragic house fire. But I'll talk about that some other time. And I just wanted to say that the pandemic is very, very devastating to me and to my friends, and we don't know what to do half the time. We're getting all kinds of mixed messages from different countries. Now we're on the internet. We know what's going on all over the world, so we think, but we don't know the scientific what goes on in these labs all over the world. Scientists, they don't hoard information. They share information. And we're hoping that the World Health Organization, WHO.org, is telling us the truth, because we, the people, need to know what to do. And so there's a vote that goes on with all the different scientists, and they discovered that it would be a good idea. That it would be a very good idea that if everybody got a vaccine. But then a lot of people are anti-vaccine. And then there's a lot of people, maybe 75% of the world is pro-vaccine. Nobody wants to die. Are they crazy? They want to live. We want to live. We want our kids to live. Our young people and old people. Everybody doesn't want to die before their time. It's crazy, isn't it, to even suggest that the scientists are not knowledgeable, or not as knowledgeable as information we collect on the internet. But I just collected some very valuable information just by Googling scarlet fever. And it leads you... Where did I put it? I'm sitting on it. Typical, eh? It starts out with scarlet fever... scarlet fever epidemics, and it's from a university in the USA where they collected information about this scarlet fever, and they're bringing it into the future from when it started in the 18th century, or the 19th century, in the 1800s. It says here that it started in 1820. So that would have affected people in Europe. All my ancestors, they came to Canada in 1840 on my father's side. And I think about the same time on my grandmother's side. They emigrated to this country from Scotland or Ireland. I think it was Scotland. There was Glasgow. Glasgow, there was an Irish, because I have a bit of Irish, but English. I have distant cousins in England, Wales, Scotland, and a little bit of Irish, Ireland. So if you check the ancestry.ca, get your DNA, and then you find out what your roots are, basically. You can kind of go back in history and find out what pandemics were going on back in the day. But when your ancestors emigrated to North America, from where? From wherever they came from, that's where, people were coming here at the turn of the century in 1820. I think on my grandmother's side, they came here in the 1700s. To North America. So, the USA is quite an older country than Canada. It's maybe twice as old. But, a lot of people have studied. These are very educated people that go to university, and they study diseases, epidemics in particular, world pandemics. Scarlet fever epidemics of the 19th century, a case of evolved pathogenic virulence. I can't even pronounce it. But it says here, there's a little introduction to let you know, and it says that between approximately 1820 and 1880, there was a world pandemic of scarlet fever, and several severe epidemics occurred in Europe and North America. It was also during this time that most physicians and those attending the sick were becoming well attuned to the diagnosis of scarlet fever or scarlatina. They could differentiate the disease from diphtheria, it's hard to pronounce, by the presence of the characteristic rash or exanthem that accompanied the sore throat, fever, inflammation of lymph nodes, and abscessing of the throat and tonsils. Well, and it discusses this, and I guess it leads us into believing that a vaccine is to protect us. But I have friends that say that this current vaccine that we are getting for free from the country that we live in, they're giving it to us free of charge. We don't have to pay for this vaccine. It's free because the reason it's free is because usually we do have to pay. If you want your child to have a mumps vaccine, you have to buy it and pay for it and at the drugstore and bring it into your doctor's office. And that's what we had to do, mothers of the 70s and the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, I don't know what happened after that. My last child was born in 1980, so I have no clue. But, I just wanted to mention that, about the farm, and there's my dad on a bicycle. There it is. I knew I had it somewhere. See, there's my dad on a bicycle. And the horse and buggy. That's my grandmother going to town with a horse and buggy. And I went with her. I used to sit beside her. But that horse and buggy, they kept it in the family many years. They didn't throw things away. It wasn't disposable. It was a beautifully constructed carriage with wheels, and you hooked up your Scottish horses, the big work horses, the drafts horses, Clydesdales, and you went off to town to buy groceries or sell your crop. And this is the time of year that we had a crop at the fall, 4 seasons, So it's now harvest time and time to sell the fruit of the working hard all summer in the fields. And look at my father. What a cute boy. What a cute little kid he was with his big sister. Oh, but they fought. They didn't get along. She was so bossy. Oh, she bossed him around terribly. And I don't know whether she was a bit jealous that he got more attention or whatever the heck it was, but those two fought. They fought right up until he died. He fought with his sister. And he was very young when he died. He was only 56. He wasn't very strong because he got scarlet fever. And so he was always a very weak person, And I always felt sorry for my daddy because he got picked on. He seemed to like women that dominated him. But to his big sister, that's where it all began, because his mother was so loving and so caring, and she just loved her little baby boy. But the sister, oh my gosh, that big sister. Well, as it turned out, I became a big sister like Aunt Gladys, and the last time I saw her in 1988 in the summertime, In Ontario. It was a long, long trip for me, a long journey, 3,000 miles to go visit. That's a lot of miles across Canada from coast to coast, from the Pacific Ocean to this little farm in Ontario was a long journey. It took a week to drive there. If you do 500 miles a day, it takes at least a week. So I drove there and drove and drove and drove, and I saw my Aunt Gladys for the last time in 1988. Well, you never know the future, do you? But I was much younger then in 1988 than I am now. And now I'm the same age as my Aunt Gladys was then. I'm that age now. So you see, life is short. I don't want to die yet. I already have one vaccine, but I don't have a second one. And they gave me, the day I happened to be there, I just popped in. It was a pop-up clinic. And they gave me a vaccine called Moderna. It's a modern drug, and I don't know which lab it was manufactured in. My friend thinks I might be part chimpanzee now, but I have no clue. If I should get another ancestry DNA test, maybe I'll have the caveman days. They said people were gorillas and chimpanzees, so they say that the scientists think that we're all descendants of chimpanzees. So maybe I have chimpanzee DNA now. Maybe it isn't really a vaccine, but whatever's in it, it's supposed to protect me so that I don't die. But how would I know if it's a good one when everybody else is telling me it's a bad one? And not everybody, though. No. The medical people in Canada are telling me to get a vaccine. And if I get 2 vaccines, I get a little passport that says I had the vaccine. And I can keep it on my smartphone, which is what I'm holding now with my left hand. And I can keep it right on my phone. So if I travel, all I have to do is go to this smartphone and go vaccine, And then, well, they know. They know at the border crossing, they know whether or not I've even had my vaccine because it's in my smartphone. They have X-ray vision now at airports. They know what's on my phone. Everything that's on my phone, they know. They get a copy of it in their computers. So I can't pretend I have the vaccine. Nobody can. They think they can trick the government or the border patrol. They cannot. So if I want to travel, and I do, I have 3 destinations, 3 bucket lists on mine, and I would like to go south to a little country near on the south side of the Mexican border, and you can guess which country that is if you look on the map of the world, and you can see it on the map of North America, and it's just before you get to Panama. And right now, I can get into the country, but I need to show them a vaccine passport, you see. Otherwise, they won't let me in there for a holiday. But do I really want to travel with one vaccine? I can't. I cannot. I might be able to get out of the country and into another country, but would that be very wise? Am I not old wisdom grandmother? The grandmother with the wisdom? What would you do? I mean, you have to get the passport. That's it. That's all there is to it. I mean, do you realize how many business people there are that are traveling? And we need to carry on. And otherwise the economy will suffer. I don't care which country you're in, but we need to get the vaccine, And gee whiz, I don't have time to talk about anti-vaccine. but and big pharma and all this stuff, because that's another topic altogether. Right now we're fighting for our lives. I don't have much left, but I don't want to die. I'm not suicidal by any means, you know. I am just not that type of a person that doesn't want to live. You know, I want to live. You know, and let's make this world a better place. Let's nip this in the bud. It's a terrible sickness. It goes in your nose and then in your throat, and then it goes down your body, right down, and it goes all through your system, and you can't breathe. You're choked to death. And haven't you watched what other people are saying? Now here I am talking a half an hour to convince, but I had to do this because I'm an orphan. I'm a 77-year-old orphan. 7-7 orphan. When you're 77, you might be an orphan like me. I don't know. How would I know? How do you know? We don't. Nobody knows the future. You know. Should I buy 500 shares of the Microsoft shares, maybe? Or, oh no, I think I'll buy 500 shares of, what other one's a good one? Bitcoin. Let's buy 500 shares of Bitcoin, because my first job was at the Toronto Stock Exchange. Or maybe check out the New York Stock Exchange, see what the economy is. What's the what's the Canadian dollar compared to the American dollar? Or what's the British sterling, pound sterling, or the French, what do they have, the franc? And or they have the euro now. Or how long, much longer will the euro be alive? I don't know. Now the founder of that euro, she just stepped down in the government. She's no longer the chancellor of Germany. Germany controls Europe. They're the big controller of Europe. Everybody listens to Germany because that's where the money is. They make good money. Those Germans, they're excellent craftsmen. You know, they make the best shoes, the best this, the best that, but they have competition. They have a lot of competition. And, you know, it's hard to compete with these big companies, people, but they're very, very good. You know, I always, when I was in Toronto in the 60s, early 60s, I always bought made in Germany. And even the company I worked for, they bought piston bully. If you like to ski, piston bully. That machine, it's worth $1 million or more. One machine. Can you imagine one machine? And then the euro, EU, everybody wants the euro. You sell property in Europe, sell it to the German people. They have the money. They have the euro. But we don't know the future of euros. So a lot of my friends in Canada who own property in Croatia or Montenegro or Serbia, you know, they own property in Bosnia and Herzegovina. They're going to sell their property. You can sell your property from Canada, the property that you have in Europe. And that's what they're doing right now. They heard rumors. We better sell. We'll give it to the money to the kids. Because the kids, they don't speak the language of the country. So what do they care about the land over there? They don't want to live there where they can't speak their own language, different customs, different culture. They grew up in North America, in Canada, or USA. So they sell the land, but hey, you know, it's up to you. I don't own land in Europe. I did not inherit land in Europe. But where's my land? Where's the land I inherited from my father? Well, that's why my father and his sister didn't get along too well. Because he left with his wife from the city, he left the farm. So she took over 2 farms, her own farm and her mother's farm. And she sold everything and put the money in her bank. And she only gave a little bit of money to my father. So he was quite put out about that. But that left me out too, his children and his grandchildren, my father's grandchildren, and their children, you see, because that 100 acres, that land, could have been passed down from generation to generation. And that is how they do it in Europe. So, I better stop talking. My kids tell me I talk a bit too much, but I wanted to say what I had to say today so that I wouldn't talk too much tomorrow. So please listen to my video today, because tomorrow, crazy glue on the lips. I'm going to be quiet so I don't make a fool of myself in front of my granddaughter. My granddaughter's 24 years old now, and she hasn't seen me for 7 years. She's been out of the country or something. I don't know where she was. She doesn't keep in touch. Too busy. Young people are too busy to keep in touch with their ugly old grandmother like me, with matted furry hair and like a sheepdog, and who can't find a hairdresser. She's a beauty queen, she's a pretty classy girl. She's lived in France for a few years, so she's pretty classy, high fashion. And I feel like an ugly duckling beside my own granddaughter. I feel embarrassed that she sees me like this with a big matted fur ball in her hair like a dog with matted fur. And I don't know how to get this thing out myself. I tried and tried. I stayed up all night the other night when I washed my hair. And maybe it's the wrong shampoo, because now my hair isn't red anymore. See? It changed color from the shampoo. It depends what shampoo you buy. I think we had 2 choices of shampoo when I was a kid, when I was a young teenager. And I always bought Breck, B-R-E-C-K. That's no longer in existence. There were 2 kinds, the cheap one and the Breck, at the supermarket. Well, I always bought Breck. It was a little bit, looked better quality. I bought 1 bottle of Breck shampoo and 1 bottle of cream rinse, and that's what I used. It was cheap enough and good enough for me. But if I lived in France, I might have been buying expensive shampoo and cream rinse. I don't know, but I lived in Toronto, Canada then. And that was good enough for me when I was a kid. My mother was very Scottish. She didn't like spending money. But at the local supermarket, that's what I bought. Breck shampoo and cream rinse. So now you tell me what to buy. This shampoo was from Morocco or France or someplace. And I don't know what it did to my hair. Morocco. Where's Morocco? Is it that in Africa? It's in northern Africa. I think it's a little country in northern Africa. Well, they filmed a movie there once. Humphrey Bogart and Catherine, what's her name? Catherine. I forget. I'm getting old. Bye. Laku noć do Virginia. Pa kako si, pa dobro si, budi mi dobro. U Bosna, u Hrvatskoj, u Like, u Ragoznica. Pa ja kako sam naučila tvoj jezik? How do you think I learned another language? Well, I married a Bosnian Serb, that's how. I married a man from Bosnia. You learn his language, you know. How can you live with somebody and not communicate? You gotta communicate. You gotta speak to your husband. You can't say, I love you, ja volim tebi forever. You know, you gotta learn. He has to learn your language and you have to learn his language. So he learned my language and I learned his. It was fun to speak to the kids in two languages, right? They don't have to go to school. Yeah, that's when they didn't have schools for kids to learn their mom and dad's language. I better stop talking. Bye.